The Galactic Council Chamber was the largest structure ever built by living beings. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, held in place by gravity generators that had worked for 10,000 years. Inside, representatives from 412 species sat in rows that rose up like a mountain. The chamber could hold 500,000 beings at once, and today it was almost full. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the entrance and looked up at the endless rows of alien faces. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no faces at all. Many she could not even describe. The air smelled strange, a mix of chemicals that the station pumped in to keep everyone alive. Her translator device hummed quietly in her ear. "You should not speak unless they ask you to speak," said Ambassador Vel, who walked beside her. Vel was a Taurani, tall and thin with blue skin that shifted colors when he felt strong emotions. Right now his skin was a worried shade of purple. The High Council does not like surprises. They especially do not like surprises from new species. "I understand," Sarah said, but she did not promise anything. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council only 5 years ago. They were the newest species, and many of the older races still treated them like children. The Taurani had been their sponsors, helping them learn the rules and customs. Vel had worked with Sarah for 3 of those years, and he had come to respect her, but he also knew she was difficult. "The meeting today is about the Vexar situation," Vel continued as they walked down the long corridor toward the human delegation seats. "The Vexar have conquered 3 worlds in the Outer Rim. They have killed millions. The Council will debate what to do." "I know what the Vexar have done," Sarah said quietly. "I was at Calmer IV." Vel's skin flashed a darker purple. "I did not know. I am sorry." Sarah did not answer. Calmer IV was where she had lost her ship and half her crew. She had watched the Vexar burn cities from orbit, seen the bodies floating in space after they destroyed refugee transports. She still saw those images when she closed her eyes at night. They reached the human section. It was small, only 20 seats in a chamber of 500,000. The other human delegates were already there, diplomats, scientists, military advisors. They all looked nervous. This was their first time attending a full council session about a military matter. "Captain Chen," said Director Morrison, the head of the human delegation. He was a large man with gray hair and tired eyes. "Please take your seat. The session will begin soon." Sarah sat down. From here, she could see the central platform where the High Council would speak. There were 12 of them, the leaders of the 12 oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. They had been making decisions for other civilizations for longer than humans had been using fire. A tone sounded through the chamber, and everyone grew quiet. The first speaker, a being made of living crystal called a luminary, rose to the platform. Light passed through their body and created patterns on the walls. "This session of the Galactic Council is now open," the luminary said. Their voice was like music and thunder combined. "We gather to discuss the actions of the Vexar Dominion in the Outer Rim territories. All who wish to speak may request recognition from the chair." For the next 3 hours, Sarah listened to speeches. Representative after representative came to the platform to express their concern, their worry, their deep sadness about the Vexar attacks. They used many words to say very little. The Korathi, an ancient species of giant insects, spoke of the importance of peaceful resolution. The Mendari, beings of pure energy, talked about the need for understanding and communication. The Zelani, who looked like walking trees, discussed the long history of conflicts and how they always eventually ended. Not one of them talked about actually stopping the Vexar. Sarah felt her anger growing with each speech. These beings had power that humans could barely imagine. The Korathi fleet alone could destroy a star. The Mendari could travel anywhere in the galaxy in seconds. The Zelani had weapons that could reshape planets. Yet they sat here and talked while people died. "The chair recognizes the representative from the Vexar Dominion," the first speaker announced. A Vexar walked to the platform. They were big, twice the size of a human, with dark red scales and 4 arms. Their eyes were black and showed no emotion. The translator in Sarah's ear gave the words a flat, mechanical tone, but she could hear the arrogance underneath. "The Vexar Dominion has done nothing wrong," the representative said. "The worlds we have claimed were ours by ancient right. The beings who lived there were using our sacred lands without permission. We have simply reclaimed what belongs to us." Sarah gripped the arms of her chair. Sacred lands. That was what they called the ashes of cities and the graves of millions. "We ask the Council to recognize our legitimate claims," the Vexar continued. "We also ask that the Council order all other species to stop providing aid to the terrorists who resist our peaceful reclamation efforts." Peaceful? Sarah wanted to scream. She thought of the children on Calmer IV running through the streets as fire fell from the sky. Peaceful. The Vexar returned to his seat, and the first speaker called for responses. More speeches followed. The Torani expressed concern. The Mendari called for further discussion. The Korathi suggested forming a committee to study the historical claims. Director Morrison leaned over to Sarah. "We should request time to speak. Something diplomatic, showing our support for a peaceful resolution." "No," Sarah said. "Excuse me." "I said no, I will speak." Morrison's face went pale. "Captain, you are not authorized to speak for the human delegation. This is a diplomatic matter, and you are a military officer." "Then I will speak for myself," Sarah said. She stood up before Morrison could stop her. "Chair, I request recognition." The chamber went quiet. 500,000 eyes turned toward the small human section. The first speaker's crystal body flickered with surprise. "The chair recognizes Captain Sarah Chen of the Human Federation." Sarah walked down to the central platform. The distance seemed very long. She could feel the weight of all those stares, the curiosity, the confusion, the annoyance. Humans were new. Humans were supposed to be quiet and learn. Humans were not supposed to interrupt. She reached the platform and looked up at the endless rows of alien faces. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "My name is Sarah Chen," she said. "I am a captain in the Human Federation Navy. 2 months ago I was at Calmer IV when the Vexar attacked. I watched them kill 12 million people. I want to tell you what I saw." The chamber was completely silent. Sarah could hear her own breathing, the soft hum of the translation devices, nothing else. 500,000 beings waited to hear what the young human would say. "Calmer IV was a peaceful world," Sarah began. "The people there were farmers and teachers and artists. They had never threatened anyone. They had no military. The only weapons they owned were hunting rifles used to protect their livestock from wild animals." She paused and looked at the Vexar section. The representative who had spoken sat there with his arms crossed, his black eyes showing nothing. The Vexar arrived without warning. They did not ask for negotiations. They did not make demands. They simply started killing. Their ships came out of faster-than-light travel directly above the cities and opened fire. Images appeared in Sarah's mind that she could not stop. The bright lines of energy weapons cutting through buildings. The fires that spread so fast that entire districts became infernos in minutes. The screaming that came through the communication channels before they went silent, one by one. My ship, the Constellation, was on a routine patrol mission nearby. We received the distress call and came as fast as we could. When we arrived, we saw the Vexar fleet shooting at refugee ships. These were civilian transports, trying to escape with women and children. The Vexar were using them for target practice. A murmur passed through the chamber. Some of the species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Vexar representative remained still. "We tried to help. My ship was a light cruiser, one small ship against 40 Vexar warships. We knew we could not win, but we also knew we could not watch and do nothing." Sarah's voice cracked slightly, but she pushed on. We managed to protect 3 refugee transports long enough for them to escape. We saved maybe 2,000 people, and then the Vexar destroyed my ship. I was one of 47 survivors from a crew of 300. We drifted in escape pods for 6 days before rescue came. During that time, we watched the Vexar finish their work on Calmer IV. We watched them bomb the cities until nothing was left but craters. We watched them hunt down and destroy every ship that tried to flee. She stopped and took a breath. The silence in the chamber was heavy, pressing down like a physical weight. 12 million people died on Calmer IV. 12 million. That number is too big for most minds to understand. So let me make it smaller. Let me tell you about some of the people I met. There was a teacher named Myra who ran a school in the capital city. When the attack started, she gathered all her students and led them to the basement. She kept them calm by singing songs and telling stories. She was still singing when the building collapsed on top of them. There was a doctor named Petter who worked in a hospital. When the Vexar ground troops arrived, he refused to leave his patients. He stayed with them until the end, trying to keep them comfortable as the building burned around them. There was a young girl named Kira, only 7 years old. She made it onto one of the refugee ships that my crew protected. I talked to her mother afterward. Kira asked her mother why the bad people were hurting everyone. Her mother did not know what to say. Sarah looked directly at the High Council, at the 12 ancient beings who ruled the galaxy. These were real people. They had dreams and hopes and families. They wanted to live and love and grow old. The Vexar took all of that away from them, not because they had done anything wrong, not because they were a threat, simply because the Vexar wanted their planet. The Vexar representative finally spoke. The human is emotional and does not understand. The beings on Calmer IV were occupying Vexar territory. They refused to leave when asked. We had no choice but to remove them. Remove them, Sarah turned to face him. Is that what you call it? You murdered 12 million innocent people and you call it removal. They were not innocent, they were invaders. They had lived on that planet for 400 years. Their ancestors settled there when it was an empty rock. They built cities and farms and schools. They made that world their home, and you burned it all because some old map said it belonged to you. The Vexar stood up, his massive form towering over the chamber. You are a child species. You know nothing of history or rights or territory. The Vexar Dominion has existed for 50,000 years. Our claims are older than your entire civilization. I do not care how old your claims are, Sarah said. Her voice was cold now, hard as steel. Murder is murder. It does not matter if you have been doing it for 50 years or 50,000 years. It is wrong. The first speaker's crystal body glowed brightly. This debate is becoming unproductive. The council should focus on finding a peaceful solution that respects all parties' concerns. Peaceful? Sarah turned to face the Luminari. With respect, first speaker, there is no peaceful solution here. The Vexar have made their intentions clear. They believe they have the right to take any world they want and kill anyone who lives there. You cannot negotiate with that. You cannot reason with it. You can only stop it. And how would you stop it, human? Asked one of the other High Council members, a Korathi whose compound eyes reflected the chamber lights like jewels. Would you go to war? Do you know what war means at a galactic scale? Billions would die, perhaps trillions. Millions are already dying, Sarah answered. While this council debates and forms committees and calls for further discussion, the Vexar are conquering their fourth world. How many more will they take while you talk? How many more millions will you sacrifice to avoid conflict? Another council member spoke, a Mendari whose energy form flickered with agitation. Young species always believe that violence is the answer. They have not yet learned that war only creates more war, that violence breeds violence in an endless cycle. I know about cycles, Sarah said. I know about the cycle of conquest and surrender that this council has allowed for thousands of years. How many species have been destroyed because the council decided that peace was more important than justice? How many civilizations have been erased while you watched and did nothing? The chamber erupted in noise. Dozens of species shouting at once, their translators creating a wall of sound that crashed against Sarah like a wave. Some were angry at her, calling her arrogant and naive. Others seemed to support her, their voices rising in agreement. The first speaker raised one crystal arm, and slowly the noise died down. Captain Chen, your passion is understandable, but your accusations are unfounded. This council has maintained peace for 10,000 years. We have prevented conflicts that would have destroyed entire star systems. You have maintained your peace, Sarah said. The peace of the powerful, the peace that comes from looking away when the weak are destroyed. That is not real peace. That is just cowardice dressed up in noble words. The silence that followed was absolute. No one in the history of the council had ever spoken to the first speaker that way. Director Morrison looked like he was about to faint. Ambassador Vell had turned almost white. But Sarah was not finished. She had come too far to stop now. Let me tell you something about humanity, Sarah said into the stunned silence. We are young. We have only been in space for a few hundred years. Compared to most of you, we are barely more than children. But we have learned some things that you seem to have forgotten. She began to walk slowly around the platform, looking up at the rows of alien faces. On our world, we had many wars, terrible wars that killed millions of our own kind. We developed weapons that could destroy cities in seconds, that could poison the land for generations. We came close to ending ourselves more than once. But we also learned something important. We learned that some things are worth fighting for. We learned that there are evils that cannot be negotiated with, tyrannies that cannot be appeased. We learned that sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to stand against those who would harm them, no matter the cost. The Mendari Council member flickered brighter. And look at the result of your fighting. A world scarred by centuries of conflict. A species that nearly destroyed itself. Why should we listen to advice from those who cannot even keep peace among themselves? Because we survived, Sarah said simply. Because we looked at our worst nature and chose to be better. Because we built something worth protecting out of the ruins of our mistakes. More importantly, because we learned something that you seem to have unlearned in your 10,000 years of peace. We learned that there are things worse than war. Slavery is worse than war. Genocide is worse than war. Standing by while innocents are slaughtered is worse than war. She pointed at the Vexar representative. The Vexar have killed tens of millions of people. They have destroyed entire civilizations. They have stated openly that they intend to continue until they have taken everything they claim as theirs. And what has this council done? Nothing. You have talked. You have formed committees. You have expressed concern. And millions more have died. The Korathi Council member shifted his massive insectoid body. What would you have us do, human? Go to war against the Vexar Dominion. They are one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. A war against them would devastate entire sectors. Yes, Sarah said. It would. War is terrible. People would die. Worlds would burn. I know this. I have seen war up close, watched friends die in front of me, held the hands of wounded soldiers as they breathed their last. But people are already dying. Worlds are already burning. The only question is whether you will do something about it, or whether you will let the Vexar continue until they have taken everything they want. The first speaker's crystal form pulsed with complex patterns. You speak of war as if it is simple, stop the aggressor. Protect the innocent, but in reality, war is chaos. Innocents die on all sides. Lines between right and wrong become unclear, and when the fighting ends, the hatred remains, ready to spark new conflicts. I know war is not simple, Sarah replied. I know there are no clean victories, no perfect outcomes, But I also know that sometimes you have to choose. Sometimes you have to decide what you believe in and stand for it, even if it costs you everything." She looked around the chamber at the hundreds of thousands of beings watching her. Right now, across the galaxy, billions of beings are watching this council session. They are watching to see what the most powerful governments in the galaxy will do about the Vexar. And what are you showing them? You are showing them that power means nothing, that all your ships and weapons and technology will not be used to protect the weak, that when the time comes to stand for something, you will choose to sit. "The human speaks as if she has a choice," the Vexar representative said, his deep voice cutting through the chamber. "Humans are nothing. Your Federation has a few dozen worlds, a few hundred ships. You are insects compared to the Dominion. If you challenge us, we will crush you." Sarah turned to face him. She was small compared to the massive Vexar, barely reaching his chest. But her eyes were steady, her voice firm. "You might be right," she said. "You might destroy us. You have more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. On paper, you would win. But here is something you do not understand about humans. We do not fight because we think we will win. We fight because we believe some things are worth fighting for. We fight because we would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. We fight because we know that even if we lose, our resistance will inspire others to stand up. You can kill us all, every last human in the galaxy, but you will never defeat us, because the idea we fight for will survive. The idea that every being has worth, that the strong do not have the right to prey on the weak, that justice matters. That idea cannot be killed with weapons." The Vexar laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. "Pretty words from a dying species. Your ideas will not stop our warships. Your beliefs will not shield your worlds from our weapons." "No," Sarah agreed. "They will not. But maybe they will wake up some of the beings in this chamber. Maybe they will remind people that some things matter more than safety, more than peace, more than survival." She turned back to face the High Council. "I am not asking you to fight our battles for us. Humanity will stand against the Vexar whether you help us or not. We will fight with whatever we have, for as long as we can, against whatever odds we face. That is who we are. But I am asking you to remember who you used to be. Once your species were young like us. Once you faced enemies who wanted to destroy everything you had built. Once you had to decide whether to fight or surrender. You chose to fight. That is why you are here today. Somewhere along the way, you forgot that. You became so focused on preserving your peace that you forgot why peace matters. Peace is not just the absence of war. Peace is justice. Peace is freedom. Peace is the ability to live your life without fear that someone stronger will come and take everything from you. The Vexar have shattered that peace for millions of beings. They will shatter it for billions more if no one stops them. The question is not whether there will be conflict. The conflict is already here. The question is whether you will be part of the solution or whether you will stand aside and let evil win. The chamber was completely silent. Sarah could see beings shifting in their seats, looking at each other, at the council, at the Vexar. Something had changed in the air, a tension that had not been there before. "I have said what I came to say," Sarah concluded. "I know I am just one human, one voice among millions. I know I have probably violated every rule of diplomacy and protocol that exists. I do not care. What I care about is the truth, and the truth is that the Vexar are murderers. This council is complicit in their crimes and something must be done. I do not know if my words will change anything, but I could not stay silent, not anymore." Sarah walked back toward the human section. The distance seemed even longer now, the weight of 500,000 stairs pressing down on her shoulders. She could see Director Morrison's face, pale with shock and anger. She could see Ambassador Vell's skin cycling through colors she had never seen before. She could see the other human delegates looking at her with expressions that ranged from horror to something that might have been admiration. She had just reached her seat when the first voice rose from the crowd. The Kalari support the humans' words. Sarah turned. The Kalari were a species of small, furry beings from a cluster near human space. Their representative, barely visible in the vast chamber, was standing and waving one of her 4 arms. The Vexar attacked our trading posts 2 years ago. We reported it to the council. We begged for help. The council formed a committee to study the matter. While they studied, the Vexar took 3 more of our stations. Thousands of our people died. The human speaks truth. Another voice joined in. The Prendi support the human. This came from the opposite side of the chamber where a species of tall, gray-skinned being sat. Our colony on Ventus Prime was destroyed by the Vexar 10 years ago. We were told to negotiate. We tried. They killed our negotiators and kept attacking. The council did nothing. More voices began to rise. The Thuron, whose homeworld bordered Vexar space, had been paying tribute for centuries to avoid destruction. The Nalori had watched their sister species be completely wiped out while the council debated. The Jakari had lost half their territory to Vexar expansion over the last 100 years. Story after story, grievance after grievance. Each voice that rose seemed to give courage to others. Soon the chamber was filled with the sound of dozens of species speaking at once, all telling tales of Vexar aggression and council inaction. The first speaker tried to restore order, their crystal form pulsing urgently. "Please, this is not productive. We must return to orderly debate." But the voices would not stop. Something had broken open, a dam that had been holding back centuries of frustration and fear. Sarah watched in amazement as the carefully controlled council session descended into something she had never expected to see: open rebellion. The Vexar representative stood again, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with barely concealed fury. "This is meaningless noise from weak species. The Dominion does not fear your words or your complaints. If you challenge us, you will share the fate of Calmer IV." "Then we will share it together," someone shouted. Sarah looked for the source of the voice and found it, the Torani section. Ambassador Vel was standing, his blue skin now blazing with a fierce golden color she had never seen. "The Torani have been silent too long," Vel said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "We have sponsored humanity. We have watched them grow. We told them to be patient, to follow the rules, to trust in the council's wisdom. But today, a human captain has shown more wisdom than 10,000 years of council debates. The Torani will stand with humanity against the Vexar. We will fight if we must. We would rather die with honor than live as cowards who let innocents suffer while we did nothing." The chamber erupted again. Some were shocked by the Torani declaration. Others cheered. The High Council members were conferring urgently among themselves, their communication devices flickering with rapid exchanges. More species announced their support. The Kalari, the Prendi, the Thuron, smaller species that had lived in fear for generations. Medium powers who had watched the Vexar grow stronger with each passing decade. Even some of the larger civilizations began to speak of their concerns, their doubts about the policy of appeasement. The Vexar representative looked around the chamber, and for the first time, Sarah saw something other than arrogance in his eyes. She saw uncertainty. She saw fear. "This is madness," he said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "You cannot all stand against the Dominion. We will destroy you all." "Then destroy us," said a new voice. Everyone turned. The Korathi council member had risen to his full height, his massive insectoid form towering over the other council members. His compound eyes reflected the light of the chamber like 1,000 stars. "I am old," the Korathi said. "I have lived for 3,000 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched civilizations destroy themselves and others. I have always believed that peace was the greatest goal, that any alternative to war was better than conflict. But today, a young human has reminded me of something I had forgotten. Peace without justice is not peace. It is surrender. and surrender in the face of evil is not wisdom, it is complicity. The Korathi Empire has stayed neutral for too long. We have hidden behind our power, telling ourselves that it was not our fight, that we should not interfere. But neutrality in the face of genocide is not neutrality. It is choosing the side of the oppressor. I am old, but I am not dead. And I would rather die fighting for something that matters than live another 1,000 years knowing that I did nothing while innocents suffered. The Korathi turned to face the other council members. I call for an immediate vote on action against the Vexar Dominion. Not a committee, not a study. Action. Military, economic, diplomatic, everything we have. The first speaker's crystal form flickered with complex patterns. This is irregular. Such a vote requires proper procedure, advance notice, time for deliberation. Proper procedure has failed, another council member said. It was one of the Zelani, the tree-like beings. Their voice was deep and slow, like roots growing through stone. We have followed procedure for centuries while the Vexar have grown stronger. How many more must die while we deliberate? More council members spoke. Some still urged caution, still called for more discussion. But the tide had turned. Something had changed in the room, a shift in the fundamental balance that had held the galaxy in stagnation for so long. Sarah watched it all happen, barely able to believe what she was seeing. When she had walked to that platform, she had expected to be ignored or laughed at. She had expected to make her speech and be escorted out, possibly banned from ever attending a council session again. She had never imagined that her words might actually change something. The first speaker finally raised their crystal arm. Very well, the council will vote. All in favor of immediate action against the Vexar Dominion, signify now. Lights began to flash across the chamber as delegation after delegation registered their vote. Sarah watched the tally display, her heart pounding. The numbers climbed higher and higher. 200 species in favor, 300, 400. When the voting ended, the count stood at 371 in favor, 41 against. The vast majority of the galaxy had chosen to stand against the Vexar. The Vexar representative stormed out of the chamber without another word. His delegation followed, their heavy footsteps echoing through the suddenly quiet room. Everyone knew what this meant. The vote was a declaration of war, even if no one had called it that. The Vexar would not accept sanctions or diplomacy. They would fight. But for the first time in a long time, they would not be fighting defenseless victims. They would be fighting a galaxy that had finally decided to stand up. The first speaker called for order, and slowly the chamber settled back into something like normal. But nothing would be normal again. Everyone could feel it. A new era had begun, born from the words of one human captain who had refused to stay silent. Sarah returned to her seat and found Director Morrison staring at her with an expression she could not read. "Captain Chen," he said slowly, "you just started a galactic war." "No," Sarah replied. "The Vexar started the war a long time ago. I just convinced people to stop pretending otherwise." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "I suppose you did. I should probably be furious with you for violating every protocol in the book, but I find that I am not." "Neither am I," said Ambassador Vell, who had made his way through the crowd to join them. His skin had returned to its normal blue, but there was a warmth in his eyes that Sarah had never seen before. "I have worked in diplomacy for 200 years. I have always believed that patience and compromise were the best tools, but today you showed me that sometimes the best tool is simply the truth." The council session officially adjourned, and delegates began to file out of the chamber. But many stopped to speak with the human section. Species that had never shown interest in humanity before came to express their support, their gratitude, their newfound respect. Some told Sarah their own stories of suffering under the Vexar or other aggressors. Others simply thanked her for saying what they had wanted to say for years. The Korathi council member made his way down from the high platform. his massive form moving slowly through the crowd. When he reached Sarah, he bent down until his compound eyes were level with hers. "Captain Chen," he said, "I have lived for 3,000 years. I have met beings from across the galaxy, leaders and warriors and thinkers of every kind. But I do not think I have ever met anyone quite like you." "I am just a soldier," Sarah said. "I said what needed to be said." "That is exactly what I mean. You saw what needed to be done and you did it without regard for consequences or protocol or personal safety. That is rare. That is valuable." The Korathi straightened. "The war ahead will be long and difficult. The Vexar are powerful and they will not fall easily. But with allies like humanity, I believe we will prevail." Over the following days, the galaxy began to mobilize. Fleets that had not moved in centuries powered up their engines and headed for the conflict zones. Factories that had been building consumer goods switched to producing weapons and warships. Species that had never worked together began coordinating their military forces. The Human Federation, despite being one of the smallest powers in the coalition, was given a central role in the planning. Sarah found herself promoted to admiral and placed in command of a joint task force that included ships from 12 different species. It was a responsibility she had never expected and was not sure she was ready for. But she accepted it because she knew that this was what she had fought for. Not glory or power, but the chance to make a difference. The chance to protect the innocent and stand against those who would harm them. The first major battle came 2 months later, at a system called Variant Prime. The Vexar had gathered a fleet of 500 warships, the largest concentration of military power they had ever assembled. Against them stood a coalition fleet of over 1,000 vessels from 40 different species. Sarah stood on the bridge of her flagship, the newly built Constellation II, and watched the Vexar fleet on the tactical display. They were still formidable, their ships larger and more heavily armed than most of the coalition's vessels. On paper, it should have been an even fight despite the numerical advantage. But wars are not fought on paper. Wars are fought by beings with hearts and minds and beliefs. The coalition forces believed in what they were fighting for. The Vexar only believed in conquest. "Admiral Chen," her communications officer said, "we are receiving a message from the Vexar commander. They are demanding our surrender." Sarah smiled, put it on the main screen. The Vexar commander appeared, a scarred veteran with dark scales and cold eyes. "Human, you have led these fools to their destruction. Surrender now and I will show mercy to your followers. Resist and you will all die." Sarah looked at the alien on her screen. She thought of Calmer IV, of the millions who had died, of the children she had seen floating lifeless in space. She thought of the teacher singing to her students as the building collapsed. She thought of the doctor refusing to abandon his patients. She thought of little Kira asking her mother why the bad people were hurting everyone. "No," she said simply. "No, that is all you have to say." "That is all I need to say. You asked for surrender, the answer is no. It will always be no. Today, tomorrow, and every day until this war is over. We do not surrender to murderers." She cut the transmission and turned to her tactical officer. "All ships, begin the attack." The Battle of Variant Prime lasted for 18 hours. It was brutal and bloody, with ships dying on both sides. The Vexar fought with their usual ferocity, but they faced something they had never encountered before: enemies who refused to break. No matter how hard they pushed, the coalition lines held. No matter how many ships they destroyed, more took their place. In the end, the Vexar fleet was shattered. 300 of their ships destroyed, 100 captured, the rest fleeing into deep space. It was the first major defeat the Vexar Dominion had suffered in over 1,000 years. The war continued for 3 more years. There were more battles, more victories, and some defeats. The coalition pushed deeper into Vexar space, liberating worlds that had been under their control for centuries. The Vexar fought back desperately, but they could not match the combined might of a galaxy that had finally decided to stand together. When the final surrender came, Sarah was there to receive it. She stood in the same Galactic Council chamber where she had given her speech, watching the Vexar High Command sign the treaty that ended their reign of terror. The terms were harsh but fair. The Dominion was dissolved, its military dismantled, its leaders tried for their crimes. The worlds they had conquered were given their freedom. Afterward, as the chamber emptied, the first speaker approached her. The luminary's crystal body glowed with warm colors. "Admiral Chen," the first speaker said, "3 years ago you stood in this chamber and accused me of cowardice. You said that the Council had forgotten what it meant to stand for something. You were not wrong." "I was angry," Sarah said. "I spoke too harshly." "No, you spoke the truth. That is a rare and precious thing. The Council has existed for 10,000 years. In that time we have grown comfortable, complacent. We forgot that peace must be defended, that justice requires courage. You reminded us." The luminary extended one crystal arm. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I offer you our thanks. Humanity has proven itself worthy of respect. More than that, you have proven yourselves worthy of admiration. The galaxy is better for your presence in it." Sarah took the offered arm, feeling the strange warmth of the crystal against her skin. "We are still young," she said. "We have much to learn." "Yes, but you have also much to teach. That is the nature of wisdom. It does not belong to the old or the powerful. It belongs to those who are willing to speak the truth, no matter the cost." Sarah thought of her crew, the ones she had lost at Calmer IV and in the battles since. She thought of all the beings who had died in the war, Coalition and Vexar alike. The cost had been high. But looking at the signed treaty, at the promise of freedom for billions, she believed it had been worth it. "There will be other threats," she said, "other challenges." "Yes," the first speaker agreed. "There always are, but now we know how to face them, not with silence and appeasement, but with courage and truth. You taught us that, Admiral, you and your people, and we will not forget." Sarah nodded and turned to leave the chamber. Outside, the stars waited, billions of points of light against the endless dark. Somewhere out there, a little girl named Kira was growing up on a world that would never be threatened by the Vexar again. Somewhere, children were learning to dream without fear. That, Sarah thought, was worth fighting for. That was worth speaking the truth for. That was what it meant to be human. She walked out into the stars, ready for whatever came next.